This is where we start to now get into the distinction between yoga sports science approaches and general traditional yoga. And this is not a criticism of that either. It's an understanding of how many yoga teachers are out there doing fantastic things with athletes. But I think this is really about how we can really hone it in to being more specific and why that matters. So with the athlete very much in the center of a lesson plan, a one-to-one session, a long-term planning intervention, the sport-specific demands of the athlete really need to be considered. And what we're going to look at now, and what I want to share with you, is how yoga links directly into an athlete's training. So for those of you that are curious about where yoga fits into sports science environments, this is how the yoga sports science approach has helped our yoga sports coaches to take the knowledge and apply it. And I'm hoping that our panelists tonight will be able to share something of maybe one of these different areas that they've found to be effective in their delivery. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at in relation to an athlete-centered intervention, a yoga intervention, and by that I mean, it could be a breathing technique, it could be a handful of techniques or postures, but this is where my journey certainly started with inquiry, was around strength and conditioning. Why aren't athletes using yoga in a more, kind of athletic environment? And strength and conditioning is the first place to start. I know, Emily, on your website, you've got this lovely quote about yoga is strength and conditioning. You come
Absolutely.
out and say, yes, perhaps you just want to say something briefly about that point before we move into the session.
Well, something I've definitely noticed, especially when I first started going out and trying to basically find work and find athletes who are interested in this, is their coaches and their strength and conditioning coaches, they kind of expect you to speak their own language. So understanding that strength and conditioning world and demands that they're going to go through when they're in the weight room, when they're on the field, it's going to be really important when it's up to you to then deliver yoga that's going to help them perform better in that scheme of things. From there, we all understand as yoga coaches, it is strength training. I mean, it truly is strength through range of motion. That is strength. That is performance enhancement, and you being able to convey that to an athlete and to a coach and to a strength professional.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you for sharing that. I know we're going to come back to that point with you perhaps when you talk more about the work you've been doing with athletes. I think just to say to you in terms of benefits that yoga can bring, particularly under the umbrella of strength and conditioning, is functional mobility. It's that flexibility and it's that strength and range of motion. Also, obviously, musculoskeletal support, but then it has to be specific, because you wouldn't give Usain Bolt the same yoga technique or intervention that you would give an archer or you would give Tom Daley, the diver. So it has to be which muscles are you switching on and why. Then looking at functional stability, the requirements of functional stability for different athletes, different ages, are going to be very, very different. Overall structural fitness, that I think seems very obvious to hopefully those of you in the audience, as does postural balance, but also proprioception, that development of the awareness of oneself in space, but also from an athletic perspective, when you're a team player, that can be huge. That can be the difference between an awareness to the ball coming to you, or whatever your teammates are passing, that if you develop that, you have an advantage. And that kind of marginal gain advantage, when you're trying to get into sport and you're talking the language of sport to either coaches who perhaps, when I say coaches, I'm talking about athletic coaches who may be very skeptical about yoga because they see it perhaps mainly for women wearing purple lycra and that eat lentils. Those days are over, but they still believe that may be the case. When you start talking proprioception and the specifics of sport, then you've got their attention. The other area as well where yoga can add enormous benefits is in movement efficiency, and we'll look at that as well in the session to come. And also sequence techniques which link into a particular movement flow within the athlete's own sport. And then looking at other areas that are athlete-centered around physiotherapy, again, as you're